What you're looking at is a map of our world, a collection of continents, over 8 million people, and different creatures roaming the face of this planet. And this is a map of the 527 cables that line the ocean floor to bring us the internet. But okay, why do we even need cables to provide us with the internet? How did we even get to using cables? The first undersea cable that has been known to man was laid in the 1850s between the US and England, and it was for the purposes of communication through telegram, not the app that we know today. Unfortunately, this cable was cut about 3 weeks after it was operational, and this was because of fishermen in the course of their activities. But that was the precursor to how they would be utilized in the modern era. Fast forward to the 1960s and you have the development of what we would come to know as the internet. It would merely be a connection amongst a set of computers meant to communicate, share information with one another, and ultimately do business. Then in 1984, we would see the first ever fiber optic cable meant for internet communication laid in the English Channel between Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. And as humanity would progress throughout the years, more and more cables would be laid out through the sea until we get 574 in early 2024. Not all 574 are active. A lot are in the process of being activated. Some are about to be scrapped. So it's an ever-changing dynamic that we see with this map. So we've answered exactly how we arrived at the point of using cables, but now we need to answer how these cables work under the sea to provide us with the internet. You see, they use what we know as glass fibers. And these glass fibers are very thin, about the thickness of a strand of human hair. These glass fibers are then insulated and coated with so many different elements. I was actually surprised to know that Vaseline is used in some cases, or what we know as petroleum jelly or silicone jelly. So that's a little funny. But eventually it's all coated in either steel wire or even plastic. These cables are about as thick as a garden hose, so they are not very thick. These cables are also thousands of kilometers long, so they actually transfer the data that travels across the internet by light impulses that travel through the glass fibers of the cable. But obviously thousands and thousands of kilometers is too long, and so they have these things called repeaters on the cable, and these help in amplifying the light signals emitted from one point to another. So they help in the speed of cables. Now, talking about the speed and eventually the capacity of these cables and what they can handle and how much data they can transfer in a very short amount of time, it varies from cable to cable. So some cables actually can transfer about 300 or over 300 terabits per second, which is extremely fast. I forgot to mention this earlier, but they actually connect to land at places that we call landing points. And so these landing points are basically where a lot of the telecommunications groups and people connect their signals to in order to derive the internet connection that's then transferred through servers and then through the cell towers, which gets to our phones. The more cables that are connected to your country or to a landing point, the better it is for your country. And let me explain why. Let's go to Tonga in 2020. There was an undersea volcanic eruption around the island of Tonga that then caused a tsunami, which would then cut out the only cable that connected to the island. And thus, communications were completely disrupted. Nobody knew what was going on until the cable was repaired finally after about 5 weeks. And this 5-week timeline will come into play later as we go along. Now, thankfully, this is not Ghana's position because Ghana has 6 cables that are connected to it, or actually 4 which are operational, 1 which is now defunct. And I'll go through all of that in a second. So these are the 6 cables that connect to Ghana. There's the ACE, there's the WACS, there's the SAT3 or WASC, not to be confused with the previous one we mentioned. Then there is Main 1, there is Glow 1, and there is 2 Africa, which is actually set to be operational this year. Oh, fun fact, I should mention, the 2 Africa cable is about to be the longest undersea cable for internet connection in the world at 40,000 kilometers. The longest actually is the Asian American Express cable, which is about 20-something thousand kilometers in length. So it's almost double. Glow 1 we don't use anymore, I don't think, because of, you know, Glow, that cable had a lot of issues. It used to cut a lot. Glow internet connection was very unstable, and eventually the company kind of had to shut down operations over here. The 4 that we really use are the ACE, the WACS, the SAT3/WASC, and the main one. And these are the ones that have been affected. So official communiques say that on Thursday morning at about 7:43 was when they realized there were disruptions. But if you had been up earlier than that, around 5:30 a.m. was when things really started to go a little wrong. And then throughout the morning, things start to dip quite a bit until just after 10 a.m., which is when things completely went into a tailspin. And then eventually we get a statement from the NCA, the National Communications Authority, and they give us the information that yes, indeed, there have been cable cuts in the cable system that provides us with the internet, and there are varying levels of damage. The ACE and WACS systems have suffered 90% capacity loss. The main one cable has suffered about 90% capacity loss, so it could be more, it could be less. The SAT3 cable had suffered a complete 100% capacity loss, and it's bad. Coupled with the fact that that SAT3 cable is also the oldest of all the cables that we use. That cable has actually been in operation since 2002, so that's about 22 years ago. And these cables are built with a lifespan of a minimum of about 25 years, but usually they are swapped out or changed before that 25-year period, because by the time it gets to that point, technology would have advanced and they would become economically redundant. It had been determined that these cable cuts had occurred around Abidjan, Senegal, and Portugal, but Abidjan and Senegal especially become the main focus as we go along. And these cable cuts did not just affect Ghana, they've affected Ivory Coast, they've affected Nigeria, they've even affected Senegal, as we mentioned earlier. So the entire sub-region is practically in a bit of a tailspin with all of this. And as a result, the 3 major telcos, and I can't believe it's 3 now, I could promise there was a time we had about 6 telcos. All of this forced the 3 major telcos, which are also the 3 major internet service providers in the country, to kind of fall on backups or employ countermeasures of some kind. AT had about 20 gigabits per second of capacity that they could utilize, but this would eventually be overloaded when people started buying chips in order to stay connected to the internet. And then people started selling them for about 150 cedis on the street. So it kind of reminded me of what happened when the whole issue in 2020 happened and hand sanitizers kind of spiked to about 250 per bottle, or 350 in some cases, depending on where you bought them. Yeah, I can't say that word on YouTube. To clear up some speculation, how common are these cable cuts? They are more common than you think. It is estimated that about 100 cable cuts happen per year, so it's not out of the blue. It's not like a targeted thing. It could be in some cases, but it doesn't look like it's the case. And they're also saying it's force majeure, meaning it's an act of God. It's things out of their control. And this might point to some seismic activity that happened, which may have caused the cut to happen. And mind you, the cut happened in multiple places as well, so that's something to consider. Also, on how these cables are broken, it's a variety of things. It can be fishermen and their activities, it could be anchors from boats, it could even be sharks, which have nibbled on some cables in the past. But per the information that has come out, it doesn't look like any of these things came into play based on the depth of the cables. It doesn't seem likely that even an anchor would have cut one of these cables per chance. This has now raised a lot of questions as to why we are still using cables when satellite solutions seemingly have started to take hold. And when it comes to satellite solutions, a lot of people point a finger at Starlink. But here's the thing, as compared to satellite solutions like Starlink and the Google drones that they're trying to launch and Meta doing their own thing, cable solutions are actually way faster than what satellites can provide. They are also the cheapest of the 2 options, or I should say the more affordable of the 2 options, and there is lower latency. So then, to understand it better, you can use the analogy of Bluetooth headphones versus wired headphones, where, and these don't work anymore, where essentially a disruption in this can cause the entire system to fail, or can cause one ear to start messing up. You have to do all sorts of gymnastics to make sure they work. The only thing is, whereas these would have to be replaced entirely, undersea cables work a little differently. They can actually be fixed. I found some information on Main One's website, and this information has ultimately contributed to an NCA update which was released yesterday as of the time of me recording this video. Essentially, here's what's going to happen. A vessel needs to be deployed, and then it has to get the spares for repair, and then they have to sail to the points where the breaks occurred. Then they have to retrieve the cable from under the sea, which is about 3 feet in depth, and then the engineers have to splice the cable and work on it, and ultimately guide the cable back to the seabed. And this entire process could take about 5 weeks. The ultimate question now is, what happens now? What do we expect? Because it looks like services are being restored, but these are just temporary measures, mind you. They are not going to be as fast as when the cable is fully restored. But already this has had a very severe toll on the entire country. The telecommunications industry is really going to suffer a ton because of this, because mind you, that ability to make money is going to be hindered, because you are not going to have too many people transacting business if this whole up and down instability thing keeps up. Consequently, the banking system is also going to suffer. In the last few years, we have seen the push for online banking. A lot of people transact by way of their phone to pay for stuff. And if you don't keep any money in your Momo account, you are going to have to do it through a bank. And I foresee the possibility of POS systems and ATMs messing up. And this will obviously force a lot of banking halls to be full. So there'll be a lot more in-person interactions, a lot of choking, a lot of time spent in queues. It's going to be a bit of a mess. Online businesses are also going to suffer quite a bit. So there's going to be some latency in how you get your orders. A lot of things are bound to happen. People may not even conduct transactions with you because they can't even access the sites with which they will use to transact business with you. And if you're not one of those people that has a physical storefront, you are really going to have some trouble. And then this is the one that I haven't heard too many people talk about, but it is something to consider. ECG purchases. You have to bear in mind that now a lot of people use the new meter system as compared to the card system, which is slowly being phased out. And as a result, both systems are actually going to suffer. People are not going to be able to make purchases as seamlessly as they once did. And for the card systems, for those people that have to go to vendors to purchase their electricity, the network can actually mess you up entirely. And God forbid that happens to anybody and you're plunged in darkness for hours or even days on end, as is happening already before this crisis. In short, so this is everything. I hope I've explained it as best as I can. I hope I made you listen to the end, and I hope that you've taken something away from this. But I have no doubt that everything will be fine. Everything's going to be okay. These cable breaks happen quite a bit. It's happened twice in the past, actually. 2019, if you remember, MTN suffered something similar, and apparently in the early 2000s, SAT3 broke, and it was the only cable we had, and we suffered a complete 100% blackout. But of course, most people were using Nokia 3310, so we didn't really feel that. But that's going to be it. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy this video, then please do subscribe to this channel, like this video, and if you want me to make more videos like this, then I'll be more than happy. Just leave the topics in the comment section and I'll be grateful, and I'll try my best to do every single one. I've talked for about almost an hour at this point. My brain, I had to go chop. I'll see you guys later. Peace.